The alien princess landed on the grand planet with a quiet elegance that made even the stars seem dim beside her. She stepped from her silver ship, her skin shimmering faintly under the twin suns, her eyes glowing like molten gold. Her long flowing hair caught the light in strange, beautiful colors, and her presence seemed almost magical. The nobles gathered in their ceremonial robes, stared at her in disbelief. Their faces were cold, their lips tight with disapproval. Whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd, sharp as knives. "Who allowed her here?" one noble hissed. "She is not one of us," said another, voice trembling with thinly hidden fear. They had expected someone smaller, weaker, or perhaps more ordinary. They had expected a visitor they could control. Instead, they saw a being whose very existence challenged their world. The princess tried to smile politely, her hands folded delicately in front of her. She spoke in the universal tongue, her voice soft, yet carrying a melody that made the wind itself seem to pause. "I come in peace," she said. "I bring knowledge and alliance, and I hope to understand your world." But her words fell like petals on stone. The nobles ignored her entirely. They turned their eyes elsewhere, as if she were invisible, as if her very light could be by sheer will. The princess felt a sting in her heart. Loneliness pressed against her chest like a heavy stone. She had traveled across galaxies, leaving behind planets that revered her, species that adored her, all to seek understanding, friendship, and connection. Yet here, on this glittering world, she was shunned. Her advisors, smaller beings from her home planet, beside her, murmuring words of comfort. But even their soft voices could not erase the harshness of the noble's rejection. "Do not let them see your pain, your highness," one whispered, bowing low. The princess straightened, drawing a slow, deep breath, forcing her shoulders back. She was royalty. She had been trained for centuries in diplomacy, in patience, in grace. She had faced worlds in war, courts in rebellion, and beings who despised her merely for existing. Yet the isolation here was different. Here, her heart longed not for victory or revenge, but for a single sign that someone, anyone, would look at her and see her soul. She walked into the palace's grand hall, her every step echoing on the marble floor. Golden chandeliers hung like captured suns, yet their light did nothing to warm the chill that wrapped around the room. The nobles did not bow. They did not speak. They simply glanced briefly, then turned away, talking in soft, condescending tones to each other. The princess's gaze swept over them, and for a moment her eyes shimmered with quiet sorrow. This hall, which should have been a place of welcome, felt like a cage lined with frost. She remembered her home planet's palaces, filled with laughter, music, and applause for her intellect and compassion. She remembered faces lighting up when she spoke, and now, nothing. A single flower in the hall caught her attention, a pale, luminescent bloom that bent toward her as if sensing her melancholy. She reached out and touched it lightly, her fingers brushing petals as soft as silk. A tiny smile formed on her lips, fragile yet real. She whispered to herself, almost as if confessing to the flower alone, "Perhaps this world is not ready to see me, but I will not turn away." She straightened her back, and her eyes, golden and glowing, lifted toward the nobles. She had come to this world with hope, and hope, she realized, was stronger than fear. Even if all the nobles shunned her, she would walk with her head high. For the first time, she felt a strange mixture of sadness and determination. Her heart ached, but it also beat with courage. The princess knew that the journey ahead would be hard, that the walls of disdain would not crumble overnight. But she also knew that greatness was measured not by the applause of others, but by the strength to stand when no one believed in you. And so, under the golden chandeliers and the gaze of indifferent nobles, the alien princess took her first step into a world that had rejected her. And in that step, there was the quiet spark of a story that would one day shake the foundations of itself. The grand banquet hall gleamed under countless crystal chandeliers, their light reflecting off polished marble floors and glittering walls. Tables stretched like rivers of gold and silver, laden with exotic fruits, roasted meats, and wines from across the galaxy. The nobles had gathered, as was tradition, to welcome visiting royalty. Yet when the alien princess entered, the room felt colder than any winter she had ever known. Whispers rose like a tide against her, yet no one dared meet her gaze. She moved slowly to her place at the high table, her dress flowing like liquid starlight, her head held with quiet dignity. The nobles did not rise. They did not offer the customary greetings. Instead, they murmured behind their hands, their words sharp and cruel. She is not one of us. She will never understand our ways. She is strange, dangerous, unnatural. Each insult struck her heart like a stone, yet she did not flinch. She had faced harsher worlds, darker courts, more merciless rulers. Still, the sting of rejection here was different. It was personal. It was quiet but constant, a shadow pressing against her soul. She seated herself at the head of the table and waited for acknowledgement, for politeness, for even the smallest sign of respect. None came. The food passed before her untouched by the nobles, their noses wrinkling in faint disgust at her alien appearance, at the shimmer of her skin, the glow in her eyes. She tasted the delicate dishes prepared for her, savoring each bite alone, her heart heavy but her expression calm. Her advisors hovered silently beside her, offering whispered reassurances. "They are only afraid, Your Highness," one murmured. "Do not let their fear shake your spirit." She nodded, though inside she felt a quiet ache. She had not come to this world to be alone, and yet at this moment she truly was. She remembered her home planet, where her presence had inspired loyalty and admiration, where people had listened and believed in her vision. And here, nothing but cold stares and whispers that cut deeper than any blade. Still, she did not despair. Her hands, delicate yet strong, rested lightly on the table, and her voice rang softly when she spoke, a melodic sound that seemed to linger in the air. "I have come to share knowledge, to build bridges, and to learn from your people," she said. Yet the words seemed to vanish unnoticed, like petals drifting on a silent wind. The noble's eyes skimmed her face, but never met it. It was as if she were already invisible, a shadow at the edge of their world. Hours passed, and the banquet continued with the same cold ritual. The princess watched the laughter, the subtle glances, the careful avoidance. She felt a pang of sorrow, but also a small, fierce flame of determination. She had not survived centuries of interstellar politics, nor had she earned the title of princess, only to crumble before a wall of ignorance. If these nobles could not see her worth, she would prove it in other ways. Quietly, without anger, without malice, she began to observe. She studied their movements, their patterns, the way they spoke and avoided. She noticed their fear of the unfamiliar, their hesitation to embrace something they did not understand. And in her mind, a plan began to form, not one of revenge, but of revelation. She would not beg for respect. She would earn it, silently and unmistakably, in a way that would leave no room for doubt. The banquet ended, the nobles rising to leave with their heads held high, still avoiding her. But the princess remained, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight from the windows, the crystals from the chandeliers, the faint shimmer of her own determination. She felt alone, yes, but not defeated. She had come for understanding, and understanding, she realized, was never given freely. It had to be won. As the hall emptied, she whispered to herself, "Let them judge now, but I will show them who I truly am." And with that quiet resolve, the alien princess walked from the table into the night, her mind alive with possibilities, her heart carrying a spark that no rejection could ever extinguish. The alien princess did not retreat into despair. Instead, she spent her days studying the world around her, the intricate tapestries of the palace, the strange machines that hummed with energy, the subtle movements of the nobles as they walked and spoke. She watched the patterns of their behavior, noting their pride, their arrogance, and the fear that lurked behind polite smiles. She realized that the only way to gain respect in this world was not through words or pleading, but through action. One morning she announced a challenge. The nobles, curious and dismissive, gathered in the palace gardens, a place of shimmering fountains and towering crystal trees. "A test of skill and wisdom," she proclaimed, her voice calm yet firm. "A demonstration of strategy and thought. I invite you to witness what can be done when one sees beyond the ordinary." The nobles laughed, certain that a being so alien, so different, could not compete with their own mastery. Yet none could refuse the invitation. It was unthinkable to ignore a royal proclamation, even from someone they disdained. The princess led them to a set of ancient mechanisms, strange devices of light and energy that no human had touched in centuries. Crystals floated in midair, humming softly, responding to gestures and thought. She explained the rules, a challenge of timing, foresight, and creativity. The nobles scoffed, exchanging mocking glances. "She will fail," one said. "She cannot understand these devices." But the princess merely smiled, her eyes glowing softly as if she knew something they did not. She began first, moving her hands with precise grace, guiding energy streams through the crystals. Light followed her movements, bending into patterns of astonishing beauty. Machines that had long lain dormant began to function, creating a dance of colors and sound. The nobles watched, their eyes widening, their laughter fading into uneasy murmurs. They tried to replicate her actions, but the crystals would not obey them, their movements clumsy and hesitant. The princess's mind worked differently, seeing connections and possibilities that the humans could not imagine. Hours passed and the challenge continued. The sun sank behind the palace walls, casting long shadows over the gardens, yet she did not tire. Her concentration was absolute, her determination unshakable. Every motion was deliberate, every gesture precise. The nobles' faces grew pale with frustration and disbelief. Some attempted to hide their awe behind forced smiles, others whispered excuses to save their pride. But none could deny the truth. The alien princess had mastered what they had thought was beyond her. Finally, she completed the challenge. The floating crystals settled, shimmering in perfect harmony. The gardens were filled with soft, radiant light, a silent testament to her skill and intellect. For a moment, the nobles could say nothing. Their mouths opened and closed like fish, their pride stinging, their fear rising. She turned to them, her golden eyes calm, her face serene. She did not gloat. She did not mock. She simply said, "This is what can be achieved when one seeks understanding instead of following fear." The message was clear. Respect was not demanded by titles or heritage. It was earned through courage, intellect, and perseverance. The nobles were forced to confront a reality they had refused to see, that their assumptions about her were wrong, that the alien princess was not weak or strange, but powerful in ways they could barely comprehend. Some felt anger, others shame, and a few, silently, admiration. Yet even as victory settled in her heart, the princess understood that this was only the beginning. Skill could open eyes, but hearts and minds would take longer to win. She would need patience, wisdom, and perhaps allies she had not yet met. Still, in that garden under the glowing crystals and the pale twilight, she felt a spark of hope. A quiet promise whispered in the air, that one day she would be seen not as a stranger, but as a force of change, a leader who could bridge worlds. She looked at the nobles one last time, her gaze steady, and thought to herself, if they cannot respect me now, they will learn, and they will not forget. And with that thought, she walked from the gardens, the light of the crystals fading behind her, but the fire within her heart burning brighter than ever. Days passed in the palace, yet the alien princess remained a figure apart, like a moon that glowed quietly in a sky full of strangers. The nobles spoke of her behind closed doors, their voices thick with envy and fear. "She is too clever," one said, scowling. "Her mind is sharper than ours. How dare she show us our weakness?" Another muttered, "She does not belong here. She can never be one of us." Their words were meant to wound, yet they only strengthened the princess's resolve. She walked the long corridors alone, her flowing robes whispering against the marble floors. At times, she lingered near the grand windows, gazing at the alien constellations of the night sky. Her mind wandered to her home, a planet of shimmering cities and warm faces where she had been celebrated for her wisdom. She missed the laughter of her people, the music of their language, the way her presence had inspired loyalty and joy. Hereon, the halls were silent, and her voice seemed swallowed by the cold walls. Even her advisors could not hide their concern. "Your Highness, perhaps you should try to speak with them again," one suggested gently. "Perhaps a show of humility will soften their hearts." She shook her head slowly. Humility was not weakness, and pleading for respect was beneath her. "I will not lower myself for those who cannot see value in truth," she replied softly. "If they cannot honor me now, they will have to learn in their own time." There was quiet power in her words, a patience born not of surrender, but of understanding. In the solitude of her chambers, the princess began to study the people of more closely. She observed their habits, their fears, their small acts of kindness and cruelty alike. She noticed the subtle gestures of care that the nobles overlooked, the baker who left bread outside for the poor, the healer who tended to stray animals, the children who laughed freely in the palace gardens. She realized that this world was not cruel entirely. It was merely blind in places, unwilling to see beyond their own prejudices. Late at night, she would sit by the balcony, her gaze fixed on the twin moons that hung low over the palace towers. She whispered softly to herself, a mantra of quiet strength, "I will not be defined by their fear. I will define myself." The words became a shield, a steady flame that refused to be snuffed out by cold words or avoidance. She practiced patience not as submission, but as a strategy. One day, she knew, she would turn this scorn into acknowledgement, not by anger or force, but by the undeniable proof of her heart, mind, and spirit. Even in isolation, she began to act. She helped the palace workers in silence, arranging the gardens, mending torn fabrics, and offering guidance where needed. She did not expect gratitude, only the quiet satisfaction of doing what was right. Slowly, small acts of recognition began to appear, an unnoticed nod from a guard, a smile from a servant, a thank you whispered in passing. These tiny sparks were nothing to the nobles, yet to the princess, they were proof that influence was not always loud. True respect, she realized, could grow quietly, like roots under the soil, waiting for the right moment to rise. Despite the loneliness, the princess's heart remained open. She refused to harden herself completely. She allowed hope to live, a tiny flame that whispered of possibilities yet unseen. She dreamed not of revenge but of understanding, of forging connections that could bridge worlds and hearts. Every day her determination grew, and with it a quiet confidence. The princess was alone, yes, but not defeated. She carried a light within her that no sneer, no insult, and no rejection could ever dim. And so, under the silver moons and the silent stars, the alien princess stood at her balcony, her eyes shining with the quiet fire of resolve. She had been cast aside, ignored, and misunderstood. But she would not falter. The world might not yet see her for who she was, but she knew the truth of her own strength. And that truth, she believed, was more powerful than the coldest scorn. The alien princess had grown used to silence and avoidance, yet one evening, as she walked alone through the moonlit palace gardens, something unexpected happened. A human man stepped out from behind a crystal tree, tall and calm, with eyes that did not flinch at her glow. His robes were simple, not noble or adorned, yet he moved with a quiet dignity that immediately caught her attention. She stopped, studying him carefully, uncertain if he had come to mock her as the others often did. Instead, the man knelt, not in fear, not in jest, but with a sincerity that shook her. The soft crunch of leaves beneath his knees echoed in the still night air, a sound heavier with meaning than any clanging of bells or ceremony could ever be. "I see you," he said, his voice steady and gentle. "Not the crown you wear, nor the titles you carry, but you. I see your courage, your mind, and the heart you hide behind all that shimmer." The princess's golden eyes widened, her breath catching in her chest. No noble had ever spoken to her with such honesty. No one had looked beyond her alien features to see her soul. She hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Her life had been filled with politeness, ceremony, and distant admiration, but never this, never raw, unguarded recognition. The man's words were simple, yet they struck with clarity. Someone saw her not as a threat, not as a curiosity, but as a being worthy of respect and connection. She felt a warmth spread in her chest, something she had not felt in weeks of rejection and isolation. Her lips parted, but no words came immediately. She only nodded, the tiniest of smiles brushing across her face. The man, whose name she learned was Elias, rose and stood beside her, though he did not tower over her with arrogance. He spoke of his life in the outer provinces, of simple victories and small acts of kindness that shaped his days. He listened patiently as she shared her thoughts, her dreams, and the pain of being shunned. In his presence, she felt a rare sense of safety. She could speak freely without masks or carefully measured words. He did not judge, he did not recoil. He merely acknowledged her fully, as if her very existence mattered. The princess had always believed that true companionship was difficult to find, especially across worlds and species. Nobles had flattered, feared, and her, but none had ever chosen her for who she truly was. Elias did not bend under her title or shimmer. He bowed under respect, choosing to meet her with humility and sincerity. Slowly, a new kind of hope blossomed in her heart. Perhaps not all hearts in this world were closed to understanding. Perhaps connection was possible even here, even among those who seemed indifferent. They spent hours walking among the glowing flowers and crystal fountains, their conversation flowing effortlessly. The princess found herself laughing softly, the sound of rare music in the silent gardens. She realized that respect and trust could grow quietly, nurtured by honesty and patience rather than ceremony and obligation. For the first time since her arrival, she felt seen, not as a challenge, not as a threat, not as an alien spectacle, but as herself. By the time the twin moons reached their zenith, the princess understood something profound. Greatness was not measured by titles, armies, or wealth alone. It was measured by courage, by compassion, and by the loyalty and honesty of those who chose to stand with you. And now, for the first time, someone had chosen her, not out of fear or duty or expectation, but out of respect. She looked at Elias, her heart full, and whispered softly, "Perhaps I am not as alone as I believed." The man smiled, and in that smile was a promise, a quiet assurance that no matter how cold the palace, how harsh the nobles, or how lonely the halls, she had found an ally who believed in her heart before her crown, who knelt not out of obligation, but because he saw her true self. For the first time, the alien princess felt a spark that could not be extinguished. The loneliness that had weighed her down began to lift, replaced by determination and hope. With Elias by her side, she understood that her journey was far from over, but now it was a journey she would never have to walk alone. And under the soft glow of the palace gardens, the alien princess allowed herself to dream once more, imagining a world where respect, loyalty, and courage could shine brighter than prejudice and fear. Word spread quickly through the palace that a human had knelt before the alien princess, showing her respect when no noble dared. Whispers turned to rumors and rumors to outrage. The nobles gathered in their private chambers, voices sharp and angry. "This is unthinkable," one shouted. "How dare a human rise before her, before us?" Another banged a fist on the table. "She undermines our authority. This commoner cannot be allowed to stand by her side." Their fear was thinly veiled, and beneath it simmered envy and shame. For the first time, they realized that the princess's power was not just in her crown or her intellect. It was in her spirit, and now she had an ally who recognized it. The palace buzzed with tension as the nobles demanded an audience. The princess entered the throne room, Elias walking quietly beside her, neither shrinking nor bowing to the false authority that had always surrounded her. The nobles, adorned in silks and gold, formed a wall of disapproval, their eyes cold and unyielding. The air was thick with expectation and judgment. She felt their hostility pressing against her, but she did not falter. Her posture was regal, her voice calm, and her eyes glowed with a light that refused to be ignored. A senior noble stepped forward, his voice trembling with anger. "Princess, how dare you allow a human, someone of no rank, to kneel before you? Are you not aware of your position, of our traditions?" The princess studied him carefully, her mind steady, her heart measured. She did not speak in anger, she spoke in truth. "He did not kneel because of rank or because he feared me," she said, her voice resonant and calm. "He knelt because he respects what is right. And that is worth more than all the pomp and titles in this hall." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some nobles whispered in shock, others could not hide their rage. The princess continued, her gaze sweeping across the room. "You who sneer at me fail to see that nobility is not in blood or wealth or ceremony. It is in courage. It is in honor. It is in the loyalty of those who choose to stand with you, not because they must, but because they believe in you." Elias stood beside her, silent but steady, a living proof of her words. The room fell silent, the tension so thick it seemed to weigh down the chandeliers. For the first time, the nobles had no argument, no insults that could undermine her. The truth was plain: respect cannot be commanded. It cannot be bought with jewels or enforced by tradition. It is earned through integrity, strength, and the courage to stand firm in the face of fear and scorn. Some of the younger nobles, who had only known life as a series of rules and expectations, looked at her with awe and hesitation. Others scowled, unable to accept the shift in power that the princess had demonstrated. But one thing was clear: her voice, her actions, and the loyalty of Elias had changed the balance. The alien princess was no longer simply a visitor, no longer a figure to be ignored or ridiculed. She had become a force, undeniable and resolute. She spoke one final time, her words soft yet unshakable. "You may still doubt me, and you may still fear change, but I will not yield to fear, and I will not shrink before prejudice. Those who see only my origin and not my heart and mind will be left behind, and those who choose honor, courage, and truth will stand with me." The nobles retreated, some with bitter pride, others quietly pondering the strength they had witnessed. The princess turned to Elias, and for the first time in many weeks, a smile lit her face. The spark of hope she had felt when he first knelt before her had grown into a flame that now burned brightly, warming the cold halls of the palace and her own heart. In that moment, she understood something profound. Power alone could not earn respect, and fear could never command loyalty. But courage, compassion, and the willingness to recognize what is right, those things could change worlds. And with Elias by her side, she was ready to lead not only by title, but by example, showing all who doubted her the true meaning of nobility. The palace had changed. The corridors, once filled with whispers of doubt and disdain, now carried a different energy. Nobles and servants alike began to notice her presence, not as an alien curiosity, not as a figure to be feared, but as a leader whose courage and wisdom could not be ignored. The alien princess walked through the grand halls with quiet dignity, her golden eyes calm, her steps measured. Beside her, Elias walked without hesitation, a human who had chosen respect over fear, loyalty over convenience. Together, they embodied a force that no snub or insult could weaken. At the Grand Plaza, crowds gathered to see her. Merchants, guards, scholars, and children stood side by side, murmuring in awe at the sight of the alien princess who had once been shunned. Her hair shimmered like liquid silver, and her presence radiated a strength that made hearts lift and chests swell with admiration. The people did not bow out of obligation, but because they saw her courage, her compassion, and the unyielding fire that burned within her. For the first time, the princess felt the embrace of a world recognizing her not for her origin, but for who she was. The nobles arrived late, their faces pale and stiff with pride. Some still clung to their superiority, but they could no longer ignore the truth. The princess's influence had spread beyond titles and ceremonies. Her small acts of kindness, her brilliance in challenges, and the loyalty of Elias had created ripples across the palace and the city. People spoke her name with respect, not fear. They spoke of her mind and heart, of her courage and wisdom, and even the proudest nobles found themselves listening in silence. Elias stepped forward, kneeling once more, but this time not as a plea or gesture of uncertainty, but as a symbol of unwavering respect and choice. "You are seen," he said, his voice carrying through the plaza. "Not because of your crown, not because of your blood, but because of your heart, and I choose to stand with you always." The princess's eyes glowed with a warmth that reached deep into her chest. In that single act, the world's judgment could not touch her. For she had learned something far greater than any title or ceremony. That true loyalty and respect come from hearts that choose to recognize greatness, not from laws or fear. She lifted her gaze to the people, her voice steady and melodic. "I have come to this world seeking understanding, and I have found it not in fear or obedience, but in courage, in honesty, and in those who dare to see the truth." The crowd erupted in soft cheers, the sound filling the plaza like a gentle wave washing away centuries of doubt. She felt a swell of pride, not of vanity, but of recognition that even the smallest act of bravery could inspire change. The nobles, faced with the undeniable truth, bowed reluctantly, acknowledging her presence and her authority. Some would take time to accept fully, but the seed of respect had been planted. They could no longer dismiss her as an outsider or a curiosity. The alien princess had shown them the power of wisdom, courage, and integrity, and it was impossible to unsee that light. In the quiet of the evening, as the twin moons reflected on the crystal fountains, the princess and Elias walked together through the palace gardens. The flowers seemed brighter, the air warmer, and the night gentler than before. She looked at him and he at her, and in that shared glance there was a promise. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For the first time in her long life, the princess felt complete, not because the world had fully accepted her, but because she had found allies, respect, and the courage to remain herself. She had been shunned, ridiculed, and underestimated, yet she had risen above it all. And in that rise, she had illuminated the truth that HFY celebrates. That greatness is measured not by origin, race, or titles, but by the strength, wisdom, and heart within. The alien princess lifted her head to the starlit sky, a small smile touching her lips. She had walked through rejection and isolation, faced doubt and prejudice, and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The world had learned to see her, and she had learned that seeing herself clearly was the first step toward changing everything. And under the light of the twin moons, she knew that this was only the beginning of a story that would inspire generations, human and alien alike, to recognize the power within.